Okay, please check the live stream. I'm sending the link. Good afternoon, Bhavna. Good afternoon, Sai Raj Kumar, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to share my screen now. Just a second. Okay, I hope the slide is visible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So yesterday we were discussing about the Ajax. Okay, and Ajax is something that we have already discussed a few times, and if we let me see. So I'll just show you my maybe my Gmail inbox for as an example. So I hope my Gmail inbox is visible to you now, right? So over here, right, let's say if I want to select a few things, and I can actually click on drag these three conversations, correct? It tells me move 3 conversations. So it's like very responsive, just like how our normal desktop application would be. Okay, so that is an example that I wanted to show you regarding Ajax. And another thing I will show you one more thing. Say if I actually click refresh on my web browser, it would actually reload the entire page. But if I press the refresh that is there in the Gmail inbox, right over here, it would actually refresh these only the emails that has come. So for example, say I'm going to use another Gmail inbox. Okay, I'm going to just send an email just to see what happens. Yeah, so Anup JT at IIIT test email. Checking. Okay, so right now I have sent an email. No, not yet. Yeah, I have composed an email and I'm clicking on send. Oh, by the way, in between Dontu Vamshi Krishna messaged me, right? You can see that I have not reloaded the page anytime, but instead this was shown. Yeah, so for example, I have now sent another email and you can see that even without me reloading anything or reloading the page, this particular thing has been fetched and only these 2 emails, the new 2 emails are shown, and the rest of the emails have been moved down, right? So the page that is rendered to me has undergone some changes without having to reload the entire thing. Okay, so this is the email that I have sent, test email checking Ajax. Okay, so even if I had click refresh, right, if these 2 emails were not visible earlier, it would actually fetch that if it is available in the inbox. And that's the idea of what we call as Ajax. Now, so we have something called usually the web communication is synchronous, and when we introduce the Ajax and we have something called an asynchronous web communication. Okay, so let's take we have already mentioned that asynchronous JavaScript and XML is what Ajax stands for, right? Which means that it is able to establish the connection in an asynchronous manner, and then it uses XML. So So there is an XML HTTP request object, okay, that JavaScript has. So JavaScript has an XML HTTP request object that can fetch files from a web server, okay, and these are supported in Internet Explorer 7 plus, Safari browser, Firefox browser, Opera browser, Chrome browser, etc. Internet Explorer 5 and 6 don't have it, but it is the later ones have it. So Microsoft invented the XML HTTP request and Ajax for use in an online version of Outlook in 1999. Okay. So Microsoft invented this thing called the XML HTTP request and the Ajax, and this they had invented for an online version of Outlook in 1999. So Outlook, you know, you must be knowing that it is their email client, okay. So and when you say that it's going to be an online version of the Outlook, you must understand that it just means that they wanted to move it to the web. All right. Now it can do this asynchronously in the background, transparent to the user. So that is the reason why the user is able to view the page throughout the timeline, okay. So the content of the fetched file can be put into current web page using the DOM. So we know that if we get, so the idea is that you should understand we have something that is already rendered on our web page, and we are able to see that. Now we want to actually make some changes to the existing page, and how do we do that? We have to do that by changing the DOM. But before changing the DOM, we have to fetch some additional information from the server without actually having to have a full synchronous communication where the entire page is getting reloaded, right? So earlier when we discussed about Ajax, we read that, or we have seen that the server in the synchronous web communication generates and sends the entire page, while in the Ajax it generates and sends the partial page. It need not send the entire page, but it can send a part of the page as well, okay. So we have the XML HTTP request, and the content is contents of the fetched file can be put into current web page using the DOM, okay. So a typical Ajax request. So user clicks invoking an event handler. So earlier, right, when we were looking at the Gmail inbox, right, you have seen that I received 2 emails in between. I mean, when I was taking the class at around 12:16 p.m., right, which means one was sent by one of my students and one was sent by me from another email address, okay. So both the emails were actually shown, which means that even without me having to do a particular event, that is, I haven't gone and clicked on refresh, or I haven't done anything on that web page to actually let Gmail know that, okay, please let me know the new emails that I have received in my inbox. I haven't done anything like that. So there is no event that has happened, and there is no event handler also. But then you can see that it has actually done it based on probably some timing. There would be a time, you know, there would be a request that would be sent from time to time to check whether there is any new email that has been received or something like that, okay. So those students who must have used something called the Mozilla Thunderbird or the Microsoft Outlook or any of such kind of email softwares, okay. So I'll show you what I have mentioned. So this is the thing that I have mentioned. So Mozilla Thunderbird, right, you can see that it is a desktop application that you can install on your computer, and that will actually help you you know, check your email from time to time without actually opening that web browser or anything. So earlier, right, when we had emails, those were actually we did not have Gmail or anything like that, okay. We had just emails, and we had to read that email on our computer. And this is what a usual email inbox or email window will look like using the Thunderbird or something. Okay, so you have Thunderbird, then similarly you have Microsoft Outlook. You can see that Outlook is also a software that is actually installed on your computer. Lately these things, not the Thunderbird but the Outlook, say for example the Hotmail, right? The Hotmail has been changed to Outlook. So that is just a change in the the operation over there on the web. But yeah, so earlier they used to use POP3 and SMTP to configure everything and to configure the email client. Okay, so the Thunderbird and Outlook are called email clients, and so you need to configure the POP3 and the SMTP, etc. And you would have to actually do the refresh, or you can actually set some time on the settings that you have to check for the emails every half an hour or every 20 minutes and so on. Okay, so that is how this software that resides on your computer is able to display the emails, etc. Okay, now so so a typical Ajax request, in first one will be user clicks invoking an event handler. So I have been just describing to you that we have not clicked on anything or we have not done anything. Instead we have just kept the page open, the Gmail page, and at a particular time it was shown. Okay, so user clicks invoking an event handler. Handler's code creates an XML HTTP request object. Okay, XML HTTP request object requests page from the server. Okay, so first is the event handler is invoked. Second is the event handler creates an XML HTTP request object, and with that object the handler will request the page from the server. Server retrieves appropriate data, sends it back, and fifth one is XML HTTP request fires an event when data arrives. This is often called a callback. Okay, so and you can attach a handler function to this event. So when you make a request using the XML HTTP request, right? So that is the third one that you see over here. So you have made a request, and once the request has been made, you should actually have a facility on your browser or some mechanism on your browser where this response is received and is handled. Okay, and that is often called a callback. So XML HTTP request fires an event when data arrives. This is often called a callback, and you can attach a handler function to this event. So the callback event handler processes the data and displays it. So this is what generally happens when it comes to a typical Ajax request. So you should understand that we have made a call and the server responds back, and once it responds back, this particular response has to be handled at the browser or at the client, and this particular response is then it's handled by a handler, and then necessary changes on the DOM are done so that it can be displayed. Alright, so the XML HTTP request methods are so these are the core JavaScript object that makes the Ajax possible. Okay, so we have open, send, abort, and get all response headers, get response header, and get request header. Okay, so these are the different methods. So the method open specifies the URL and the HTTP request method. Now, do you guys know about the HTTP request method or have no idea? Okay, so there are different HTTP request methods. Okay, so you have get, head, post, put, delete, patch, trace, connect, etc. Okay. So you have like something like head, put, delete, connect, option, get and post are the widely used methods. Okay, so which means that we need to understand what these methods mean. Okay, so HTTP request method. So in the get request, right? Usually get request is used to retrieve and request data from a specified request resource in a server. Okay, so in get, right, if there are any parameters etc., those usually get appended by the URL. Okay, so in simple words, the get method is used to retrieve whatever information is identified by the request URL. While on the other hand, right, there is something called post. Post is another popular HTTP request method. Okay, and in this one, right, the data is actually sent as a separate entity. Okay, so the information, so the post requests are utilized to send data to a server to create or update a resource. So get also can do the same, but with the problem with the get is that with the get it is the URL which generally gets created. So that is the reason why it was mentioned here. In simple words, get method is used to retrieve whatever information identified by the request URL. Okay, say for example, if I go to Facebook, I write facebook.com/user question mark equal to the user ID. Okay, ampersand post equal to post question mark equal to, then I write the post ID or something like that, right? So which means that I have the entire URL which identifies a particular post on Facebook. I mean, I am not saying Facebook uses get request, but this is just an example, a random example. It could be for any website. Okay, so that is what get does. But the problem with get is that since I know the URL that I have used to get that particular resource, I can make some changes in the username or in the post ID, and then maybe I will be able to access somebody else's post, some other post. Okay, so this is the problem with get. So imagine a situation where you are going to send some data to the server. So you have filled in a form and you are sending some data to the server. Now whatever you have filled, right, in the form, when you are sending it, you have to put everything into a URL. And now what is going to happen is that I know what all are the data that is sent, and I can easily go ahead and make changes to the data on the URL, and thus I will be able to cleverly use that get request to do something else. Okay, while post request, right, post requests are utilized to send data to a server to create or update a resource. Okay, so the information submitted to the server with post request method is archived in the request body of the HTTP request. Okay, the HTTP post method is often used to send user generated data to a server. Okay, between post and get HTTP methods. So you can actually read up a little bit more about what is HTTP, the HTTP methods. Okay, so the HTTP method get, right, that I have mentioned will have if you are going to access a particular URL, let's say IIT.ac.in/test/demo_form.php question mark name 1 is equal to value 1 ampersand name 2 is equal to value 2, etc. So this will be your entire URL. Get request can be cached, get request remains in the browser history, get request can be bookmarked, get request should never be used when dealing with sensitive data. This is the most important thing. Okay, while the post, right, in the post the URL will be only this much. Earlier the URL was a long URL, question mark and then the key value pair, again another key, another value. Okay, while in here in the post also we can actually send the same data, name 1 value, name 2 value 2, etc. But here we do not send it in the URL, but instead in the HTTP, the request body of the HTTP request will contain the particular data. Got it, right? So that is the basic idea. Now, yeah. So you have open. So you can either open it in get or in post or in put or in whatever method that you want it to be opened in, correct? So open the method, the URL, and what mode of opening is it? Is it going to be synchronous or asynchronous? If it is synchronous, it means that it will get blocked, right? Which means that until the time you get a response back, it will get blocked. Okay, so open, method, URL, and asynchronous. Specifies the URL and the HTTP request method. And then you have send. So sends the HTTP request to the server with optional post parameters. Okay, and then you have about to stop the request, and then you have get all response headers, get response header, set request header. Okay, so the get all response headers takes no parameters, get response header takes one parameter name, get set request header is name and value. So these are for getting and setting the row HTTP headers. Okay, so let's take a look at what are row HTTP headers. So it's just it just means that it is not it has not been encoded. Okay, it's just the entire information that you are going to send to the web server in a raw format. Okay, so these are the different methods and their descriptions for the XML HTTP request methods. Okay, then you have different properties. Okay, like response text, response XML, status text, timeout, ready state. So response text means the entire text of the fetched page as a string. Response XML, the entire contents of a fetched page as an XML document tree, seen later. And then you have status. So the status are the different HTTP status codes. Okay, say, yeah, I'll just copy this. So if you want to know what exactly we are discussing, okay, so this is something called RFC. So I've searched on the Google for HTTP RFC 2616. Okay, so what RFC 2616 for protocol? It says that it is the hypertext transfer protocol. Okay, and if you look at what is 7230, it's about overview of the HTTP architecture and associated terminology. Okay, so what we are really interested in is the 2616. So let's take a look at what is 2616. Okay, so this is the RFC. RFC stands for what? Request for comments. RFC stands for request for comments. It's a document, okay, that is actually created to explain the the standard that is being used, or the way with which different programs interact, etc. And this is actually put up so that you will get some comments on the same. Okay, so that is why you have the, it's called as the request for comments. So this is the RFC 2616 for hypertext transfer protocol, HTTP. So you can see that the status of this memo, this document specifies an internet standards track protocol for the internet community and requests discussion and suggestions for improvement. Please refer to the current edition of the Internet Official Standards Protocol, Standard 1, for the standardization state and status of this protocol. Distribution of this memo is unlimited. Okay, and you can see that copyright notice, the Internet Society 1999, all rights reserved. Abstract, it gives you some abstract about the what is RFC 2616. So HTTP is an application level protocol for distributed collaborative hypermedia information systems. Okay, it is a generic stateless protocol which can be used for many tasks beyond its use for hypertext, such as name servers and distributed object management systems and so on. So you can see the contents. Okay, if you look at the contents, right, you can see that it contains a lot of information. Okay, it tells about the HTTP message types, message headers, message body, message length, general header fields, right. It mentions about the media types, multi-part types. Okay, so have I told you about say something called MIME? Yes, I think, right, because when we were learning about text/JavaScript and text/CSS, I told you about MIME, right, multi-purpose internet email extensions. Okay, so remember this text/CSS, and then I mentioned text/JavaScript. Okay, and so on. And if you want I think for PDF also you have different MIME types. Okay, so these are all defined at some place, at some particular point in time, in some particular, based on some particular rule, etc. Okay, now going back, yeah, so we were looking at the status codes. Let me show you the status codes here. Yeah, so if you look at the status codes on the document, right, you will further get details about the different status codes that are available on the on HTTP as well. Say for example, if the response status codes is 100 or 101, 100 means continue, 101 means switching protocols. The response may include a data header field at the server's option. If the server status code conveys a server error, right, so sometime, right, it says internal server error, so it actually returns something called a status code with that. Sometimes it says 503 service unavailable, and it is inconvenient or impossible to generate a valid date. So all of these things, right, will give information about the different status codes. And when everything is okay, you usually get a 200 status code. Okay, and 206 if it is a partial content, etc. Okay, and so status code, and then you have say the HTTP messages. Okay. Just a second. Yeah, then you have the different methods. Okay, so different methods and how they are implemented, etc. I mean most details about it. Okay, now yeah, so the reason why we learned or why we looked into RFC is to explain that it is actually based on a particular standard or something that is actually predefined or already defined. Okay, so you have the status, the request HTTP status code, then the status text. Okay, so with regards to the status code, you will have some status text also. So 200 is okay, and bad request for 400 will be the status text, and the status code will be 400. Then you have timeout, how many milliseconds to wait before giving up and aborting the request. Default is 0, which means that you will have to wait forever, there is no timeout. Ready state, request current change. Okay, current state. So 0 is uninitialized, 1 is set up, 2 is sent, 3 is in progress, and 4 is complete. Okay, so that will give the information about the ready state. So you can see that a typical XML request will have these methods and these properties. Okay, and this is a synchronized request. Okay, so this is like, you know, you have a variable Ajax, which is a new XML HTTP request. Okay, so Ajax is an object now. Now Ajax.open get URL false. Okay, the parameters. So what are the parameters to open? The method, URL, and whether it is asynchronous or not. So method, URL, and it is not asynchronous, which means that it is a synchronized request. And then you do Ajax.send, and then do something with Ajax.response text. Okay, so this last thing is just a idea about what we are going to do. So once we get the response, we will do something with that. But this is not a very good idea. So create the request object, open a connection, send the request. When send returns, the fetch text will be stored in the request response text. Okay. So why would synchronous requests may not make any sense? Because why are we learning about Ajax in the first place? We are learning about it in the first place because we want to get rid of this synchronization problem, where you have to wait for some time for the server to send you back the thing. Okay, and you are actually locked or blocked at that point in time when the server is processing the request. Now that is why the synchronized request is not a pretty good way. So it would be better that we go for the asynchronous thing. So why would the synchronized request be a bad idea? Your code waits for the request to completely finish before proceeding. Okay, so when I am going to make a call to the server, my program is getting stuck at that point in time because it's a synchronous request. Easier for you to program, or definitely this is easier to program, but the user's entire browser locks up until the download is completed. Okay, this is our problem. Terrible user experience, especially if the page is very large or slow to transfer. Okay, then deprecated in many major browsers. So synchronous XML HTTP request on the main thread is deprecated because of its detrimental effects to the end user's experience. Okay, so it says, I hope you know about threads and parallel processes, etc. I don't have to explain that, right? So this is the reason why the synchronous requests are actually not a very good idea, because if you do it synchronously, then you are actually not doing a good job, because for you programming will be very easy. You will just make a request, you will wait until it responds back, but until it responds back, the user who is actually working on your computer, right, will get frustrated, because the user will start experiencing certain things, like, you know, the browser that the user is using will get stuck or extremely slow as well. Okay, so better solution would be to use an asynchronous request that notifies you when it is complete. So that is where it is told callback. Say for example, I want to talk to let's say Avinash Singh in this class. So I tried calling Avinash, but Avinash, right, was busy at that time. So I just sent him a message, Avinash, please call me whenever you are free. Correct? So Avinash, after some time, when he looked at the phone, he saw the message from me. Now I have not been waiting for Avinash. Okay, I have not been waiting for Avinash to call me, or else I would keep my phone in my hand, keep looking for the call that I am getting from Avinash. So that is not happening. Instead, since I have sent a message saying that Avinash, please call me back whenever you are free, it means that it is an asynchronous request that I have made to Avinash. So Avinash will call me whenever he is free. Okay, and that is called a callback. Correct? So that is called a callback. Now imagine I am not there at the point when Avinash calls. Correct? So which means that I would actually have made a handler or a person ready and instructed that person to give some information or do something based on the information that Avinash gives on the call. Okay, so Avinash called back, and then I have done some work with the data that Avinash has given, and it is not done by me. Okay, it is done by another handler, and that is why it's called a callback, and handling the callback. Okay, so there are different XML HTTP request events. One is the load event, occurs when the request is completed. Error occurs when the request fails. Timeout occurs when the request times out. Abort occurs when the request is aborted by calling abort. Then you have load start, load end, progress, ready state change. Okay, so that is progress the events to track a request that is in progress. Okay, so these are the different XML HTTP request events. Just a second. So the basic idea in asynchronous request is something like this. Okay, so which means that when the XML HTTP request has been loaded, right, occurs when the request is completed, which means that I have sent a request to the server and it gets available at my end and I will be able to load it. So I'll do it something like this: var ajax is equal to new XML HTTP request. Just a second, guys. I'll move my video to the top because I think yeah, right. So we have variable ajax, which is a new which is created by the new keyword. Okay, and so we create a new object of XML HTTP request called ajax, and on ajax onload, right, so that is a event ajax onload, we have to handle it by the function called function name. Okay, and then what we do is ajax, so that is the configuration. So ajax dot onload, whenever the ajax has returned the response, right, so that is what it means, occurs when the request is completed. Okay, so we actually set it up saying that I'm going to make an ajax call, but when the ajax response comes back, I have to call this function name. So ajax.onload function name, and ajax.open the method, the URL and async true, and then ajax.send. So this is the basic idea of an asynchronous request. So attach an event handler to the load event. So whenever the load event takes place, right, we will have a event handler attached to it. So function name. Handler will be called when request state changes, example finishes. Function contains code to run when request is complete. Inside your handler function, this will refer to the Ajax object and you can access its response text and other properties. Okay. So you can see that here, right, in this example we have not actually defined the function name function. So the function name is the name of the function that is handling the onload event. Okay. So the event handler is function name. So we have mentioned that in the last part, inside your handler function, this will refer to the Ajax object and you can access the response text and other properties when the request is complete. So over here, right, we have something like if this dot status is equal to 200, do something with this dot response text, else code to handle the error. Okay. So this is how a general Ajax request idea is. So web server returns status codes for request. 200 means success. You may wish to display a message or take an action on a failed request. Okay, copy link address. So this Wikipedia page is showing you a list of the status codes. So the status codes, like 1xx are informational responses, 2xx are successful things. So 2xx means it can be 200, 201, 202, etc. Then you have 3xx which are for redirection, 4xx for client error, 5xx for server error. Okay, so that is the main idea. And if you look at the things, 100 is for continue, 101 is for switching protocols, 200 okay, 201 created, 202 accepted, correct, and so on. Then for 300 you have different things, and then for 400 you have different things. Okay, and out of that 404 is not found. Yes, is somebody trying to speak something? Navneet, okay, was that by mistake? Okay, so this is the idea. Okay, so these are different codes, HTTP status codes, which means that you can actually program your event handler in such a way so as to handle the different events or the different scenarios the server is going to throw at you when the program is running, right? Not always we can expect the server to return a positive 200 okay. Sometimes the server may be busy, sometimes the server resources may not be accessible, etc. In those cases the server will be returning some other values. So which means that based on the value that we are receiving, we should be able to understand what that HTTP response was, and we should be able to handle it with the JavaScript, correct? So over here you have this dot status equal to 200, do something with this response text, else code to handle the error. Okay. So you may wish to display a message or take an action on a failed request, or even on a successful request you may want to do something. Okay. Next is we are introducing the on error, handling the error event. So here we are creating a new event handler called error function name, which is going to work on the event on error. So this is a graceful way to handle errors, is to listen for the error event. The handler is passed the error exception as a parameter. You can examine the error as well as the request status to determine what went wrong. Okay, so it can be like this. So for example, ajax.onError, the function is that we are going to use is called ajax failure. So function ajax failure, then you have the exception, and that's the parameter. Okay, and it will, so that you will be able to write the handler for on error. Okay, so I think let's stop it here for the time being. We have the class committee meeting today, right? So,
Yes, sir.
yeah, at 1 o'clock. So I have to join. So that's it, guys, for today. And debugging at sports. Okay. Yeah. So we will see these rest of the things tomorrow, and then we will continue with our PHP and the rest of the modules. Okay. That's it, guys. Let's meet tomorrow. If you have any questions, queries, you can ask me. Okay, I'll stop streaming and I will stop recording as well. Thank you for joining in the class today. Bye. See you tomorrow. Thank you, sir.